it starts.
Yep.
And we are now live. So it went that quick. So
usually it takes a second, so let me...
it actually went live, so let me see.
People
should start kicking.
Then I will, once people all catch on, then we can start.
So we're on. They're watching this.
Yeah, they are.
Yep, they are. It's about a 45 seconds.
Fascinating glimpse behind the scenes, isn't it, folks? She's on her phone.
I mean, I'm on my phone. Okay, so...
Normally the interviewers pay a little more attention, but...
Yeah, I
know. You finish your tweet.
Okay, I gotta share. You guys know I have to share. Okay, because we want to make sure that we get enough people watching, because it's going to be a great...
Whoa, that's not water!
This is going to be so much fun.
This is the non-alcoholic water.
It is.
Just so we're clear. You run a class act here.
Oh, thank you. Between our water, our props, our snorting dog, you are all set.
The dog looks exactly like Gary Fisher, which I thought was nice.
And it's funny to get
him out for the commercial.
And the Amazon commercial was sensational.
Yeah.
Good job, Jack.
Good job, Jack.
Yeah, that was my favorite commercial of the Super Bowl.
Well, yeah, Harrison Ford was in it.
Yeah. And
I swooned.
That commercial was just great though. I liked when they were sitting in the hot tub and it looked like the Bellagio fountains in Vegas.
Yeah.
We actually laughed at that.
It's funny, our staff, Erica on our staff, the one who wrote the article I was telling you about, she is so excited. She told me about an hour ago. She's like, I'm so excited for tonight. I'm like, you're not even here.
You have some super fans watching, which is awesome.
What's going on? I don't know how any of this works.
Okay, so we're waiting for people to catch on.
Yeah,
and once they start going on, then we're going to start chatting.
I see Arizona.
So we're on the air, but we're not.
We are on the air. We are,
but we're not.
But we're not. Okay, so as usual, you guys, please share this video to your Facebook walls so that we can get a lot of Disney fans watching our show tonight, because it's going to be such a good show. I promise.
And we get people all over.
Let's not overpromise.
It's gonna be great. It's gonna be fantastic.
Making magic and so forth.
Yeah.
We get people from all over the world, though. I mean, Ireland, Australia. Yeah, we've had them from all over the world.
Like, was it last week? We had Brazil.
No pressure.
Scotland. No. It's good. It's good.
And you have to speak their language when you talk. So you're Portuguese.
When is the Farsi segment?
Yeah.
That's all later. I'm really excited about that to show off a little.
So this is I can kind of watch the comments. Scott is going to watch.
My eyes are up here.
Okay. Scott can watch questions and comments in the back. I'm just making sure that we got, in case there's any issues or any hiccups with the feed. And again, please share. We really appreciate it. And Scott, do you want to kick off the show?
And if you share now, you will receive a free tote bag.
A free tote bag.
Jason will deliver it. Exactly.
And you're going to deliver it to their house, right?
I was told this was a PBS membership. That
would be awesome.
Now you're just strolling in.
I know. I just
very loosey-goosey.
He always announces the shows because I like do your spiel.
And it's nice that he dressed up for it.
Yeah, exactly.
He put on his good T-shirt.
That's right. Behind the camera, he doesn't need to be fancy.
Okay.
So that's
see, we're on a delay.
Yeah, so you ready for me to start it?
You go right ahead.
Okay, hello, welcome to TMSM Weekly Live show number 39 for February 4th, 2019. I'm Scott Atwood, who will be your cameraman and computer watcher today.
I am Michelle Atwood, who is in her usual spot.
and our special guest this week, Jason Surrell. Jason is a Disney author, former Disney Imagineer, and now creator at Universal, correct? Is that
yes.
Creative. Universal.
Senior creative director.
Senior creative director at Universal. So,
senior. That means I eat for half off after 4.
There you go. That works.
At select locations.
Select locations.
Free ice cream at McDonald's and 25-cent coffee.
Exactly.
Anyway,
that's very exciting.
I'm going to let you guys go ahead and start the show.
Okay.
Have a good show, and I will come back at the end to close you up.
Okay, perfect. All right, and then Scott is going to watch. I'm watching here, but I'm not going to totally pay attention. He's going to watch for questions, comments, whatever. But we're gonna
let's keep it clean.
Yes, let's family-friendly show. So we are super excited, and I know that you guys are too, because Jason.
It's very distracting.
I'll put it down.
Okay. Well, no, now I can't see what they're saying.
Okay, this is one of many the books that he has written, and I know that a lot of you have this because they do sell this in Memento Mori, among other places.
Quality retailers.
Yes, and if you are a Haunted Mansion fan, which I know you are, and like I am, this book is absolutely fascinating because it has all this behind-the-scenes, good information about one of the most beloved attractions. But before we jump right into all things spooky and such, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about you, how you got started, and all that happy stuff?
I actually started with Disney on the college program a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And my first job was at the Jungle Cruise, which is always kind of a fun first Disney job to have. And I never went off script at all, ever. Never got in trouble, never got reprimanded. It's fun to pretend. And then the next summer I came back and I auditioned for entertainment, and I got a role as a performer.
Nice.
We'll keep that a little vague for the kids.
Yes.
And then it was actually when I was working for Epcot Entertainment, a friend of mine, Bob Crummett, who still works for Walt Disney World in entertainment, he came up to me, and this was like less than a month after I moved down here, and he said, "Hey, you seem to be a pretty good writer," and I think I just done some departmental newsletters or top 10 lists or something silly. And he's like, "I have an idea for a character Christmas greeting, and I'm wondering if you would like to work on it with me." So we didn't know that hourly employees didn't pitch shows, so we just kind of went ahead and did it, and somehow it made its way through the approval process and actually got produced. So at the age of 21, I got to stand out on the World Showcase Promenade and hear Mickey Mouse say things that I wrote. And then from that point on, it was just onward and upward from there. And so I kept doing some of those sort of extracurricular concepts at Disney, and after a few years of that, if you looked at my resume, it actually looked like I knew what I was doing, and that's when I got the job at Universal Studios Florida Entertainment, and spent the next 5 years doing Halloween Horror Nights.
Wow.
The Haunted Houses, Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure. I wrote the Barney Show that's still running.
Really?
Yeah. And it was in that time that I got my first e-ticket credit. One of the folks at Universal Creative, which was then called Planning and Development. Very sexy name. MCA Planning and Development. But a guy named Ross Osterman, I was working with him on live entertainment concepts for Islands of Adventure, and he said, "Well, how would you like to try your hand at attractions?" And I was like, "Well, that's what I got into this for." Yeah. And so he made me the show writer for Jurassic Park. So I got to work on Islands of Adventure and did the script for the Florida version of the River Adventure and all the other elements of Jurassic, in addition to a lot of the live entertainment concepts. And so at the end of that 5 years, there was an opening at Imagineering for a show writer. So I interviewed for it and interviewed with one of the Imagineers who gave me my start a few years earlier on some of those extracurricular projects, Mike West. And he looked at my resume and said, "Oh, well, I'll be damned. 5 years ago, I told you to go out and get more experience, and that's exactly what you did."
And you did.
And what's ironic is he's now my producer on the project I'm working on at Universal Creative. So it's really interesting how all of these things
goes
come
full circle. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yep.
And what kind of like a, no pun intended, a Cinderella story that you went from doing something, like entry level, whatnot, to being able to, work on attractions and have characters reading your script, and I mean it's really impressive, you guys, all the stuff that he's done. No, it really is. It really is. Okay, but no, it really is. Okay, so
some people are just heroes. I think it's the troops, the first responders, and me.
And you. So when they had you come in,
what are people saying? They're like, "Who's this yutz?"
No, they're not.
Okay. You should be an Avenger.
Okay.
You should be an Avenger.
I should be an Avenger.
Then you do an endgame, come save it all, kill Thanos, and move on.
No, people are actually tearing up. They're so excited now. That is good. They don't get excited like that for me.
I've seen a few people say I'm tearing up hearing the story.
Yeah, see, I told you guys it was going to be good stories tonight. They're happy. Okay, so you have to do me a favor.
You're going to get a lot of new followers.
They're lying.
So my one staffer who wrote the article, Erica, is a Jason Surrell super fan.
Obviously not super enough.
So Erica
Unless she's hiding under one of the cabinets.
Erica is super excited that you're here, so we got you, Erica.
We got you, boo.
Okay, anyway.
This is not water.
So when you got to go back to Disney and work with Imagineering, let's start there. All the fun, happy stuff that you can tell us about.
Well, I mean, the great thing about working for Imagineering is like you get to touch everything. I've worked on everything from retail shops to restaurants to hotels to nightclubs to attractions. I did a few years at Walt Disney Creative Entertainment. So I got to return to my live entertainment roots, and you just get to do a little bit of everything. I got to work on, in some capacity or another, all 4 of the Disney cruise ships, and that was a dream come true. And I think for me, the pinnacle was doing early concept and story and script work on Star Tours, The Adventures Continue, and the new Fantasyland. I wrote one of the original treatments for that. So to see those kind of things come to fruition was just a dream come true. And like getting back to your earlier point about starting in an hourly capacity and on the college program, this is something I would like to say to all you students out here. No, I'm literally living proof that dreams can come true. It's just you've got to, I think, first and foremost, get yourself into a position where they can come true. And for me, that wasn't going to happen in Cleveland, Ohio,
right.
Which is lovely, by the way. It's the Riviera of the Midwest. It's the Versailles of Ohio.
Same reason we didn't stay in Detroit.
Exactly. We love the Rust Belt, though.
We got to go where the action's at.
Exactly. No, but it's a good point. It's like you have to sort of put yourself out there and at first get yourself into a position or a place where it's even possible. And then for me, that meant coming to Florida. And I transferred from my university in Ohio and decided to finish up school here because Disney had a big promote from within philosophy. So I thought it made more sense to finish up my school here while going to work every day. And I mean, that turned out to be a good move because it was literally, I hadn't been down here a month when my friend Bob came to me with that offer to work on his show concept. So it's true. And then once you're in that position, you just have to kind of just keep putting yourself out there and just try to, this is going to sound corny, but try to make your own magic. And for me, that has worked, but you just have to believe that it can happen and then take the necessary steps to make that happen. Because not everyone does that. And because it's scary. I left my family behind, all of my friends behind. And I still, I don't see my mom as much as I would like, my sister, my family, my high school and college friends. So, those things they come with a cost.
They do.
But it just depends on how firmly you believe in your dream and what you want to do.
I fully agree because from our perspective too, on a much smaller scale, I think I've changed how I look at things now because I know when I was back in Michigan, it's a different life, Midwest, different life. And, people would say that I dreamed to do this or that, and you would be like, like, is that really going to happen? But then when we got here and things, it took a lot of hard work and a lot of hardship, but, when things start to take off, now, like, when the kids tell me things like that they want to do, nothing sounds like a silly idea to me anymore.
Absolutely.
Because it's like, well, sure you can. And if you believe in what you're doing and you have passion for it, you can do anything. And I think that you're living proof of that too.
Well, it's important, I think, to share that message because there's never going to be a shortage of discouragement.
Right.
And some people get it from parents, some people get it from teachers, some people get it from their friends. So I've always tried to be very encouraging of people and their dreams, whether they're interns, working at Disney or Universal, or people still in college wanting to start out in the business and everything. That's when they need that positive message the most. Because that's when you're going to have the most naysaying, because there's the most risk. There's that pressure to kind of go the safe route. And, come up with a plan B. Make sure that,
if this isn't going to work out for you, what do you got? Backup,
and I mean, there's a certain wisdom in that because you want to be smart about the choices you're making. But I've always, felt that it's more important to really go for something if that's what you feel passionately about, because you'll hate yourself more.
The what ifs are
worse. If you don't, because that'll haunt you forever. I would rather put myself out there and fail and at least know that I took a shot rather than playing it safe and being miserable.
See, and this is awesome too, because what you don't know is I say this stuff all the time. So you were reaffirming what I say, so I'm not crazy.
Listen to Michelle.
I'm not crazy. So
I wouldn't say she's not crazy, but there is
you gotta be a little Disney crazy, right, exactly. To do with this job. But no, I think that's wonderful, and I think that the jobs that you have done and the insight that you have, like to somebody like me and to the people that watch what we do, it's so fascinating. Yeah. And especially with some of our favorite attractions. And I would love to hear some stories about like what you worked on, because I didn't realize that you had worked on the Great Movie Ride, which is now, deceased. Since we're talking Haunted Mansion, you know.
And if you read certain message boards, they'll say I killed it, but that's not.
No, I mean.
You say that Erica posted a minute ago, you probably didn't see it, that she goes, my favorite Imagineer Jason just called me his boo, I'm dead, bury me at the Haunted Mansion.
There you go. They frown on that, by the way.
They do frown on that.
They have a pretty firm no cremains policy.
Yes, they do. We've actually written about that a few years ago, but not lately because I try to behave with what I want right now. Sorry,
That's
Disney.
True. I do too. Diego, I'm thinking of you.
I'm so sorry. Okay,
you're right. You're behind me in spirit, and he's very much
He'll watch
alive,
us tomorrow and get a message.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe we could talk a little bit about Great Movie Ride, and then we got to get to Pirates and Haunted Mansion. But wherever you want to start, you go ahead.
Well, we had an opportunity in the early 2000s to make some enhancements to the Great Movie Ride, and ultimately that manifested itself in a new script, where what we tried to do was tailor the script to the strengths of the cast members that were performing there. So we came up with a ton of material, and then the cast members could actually select the pieces that they wanted to use. Because if they didn't feel comfortable using one line, they could use another. And that could be anything from the actual information about the film to a joke line to trivia. And we tried to approach it that the tour guide was kind of the ultimate film fan. And the other thing we tried to do was position the Great Movie Ride as hosting the Ultimate Hollywood Film Festival, because I was trying to find a way to sort of retcon the story to explain why you were experiencing all these films in one experience. So ultimately it wound up just being a new script, and from what I'm told, it's been very controversial in some quarters. But I think that just shows the affection that people had for the original script by Michael Sprout, which we kept, a pretty decent amount of. I think what was bothersome to me was due to budget or certain other things. There were elements that would have supported that new script that ultimately didn't make it. Like we had a bunch of props built into the show. A good example was at one point the tour guide was going to pull out the little tracking device from Aliens.
Oh, God.
In the Alien scene. So, you'd see the they're like tracking the aliens. And we were going to adjust the lighting scheme so it was a little more Jim Cameron-esque. Just little things like that.
You didn't like that idea? Or?
No, it wasn't that. It was just we wound up paring back the enhancement so that it was primarily just the new script that went in, but it was part of a larger effort that didn't see the light of day. And I think some of what we did would have made a lot more sense had it had its full context. But for me, it was just a thrill to work on it at all, because the Disney MGM Studios opened the summer that I was on the college program. Oh, wow. So we were there like every night on the Great Movie Ride at Superstar Television, So it was something that was really important to me, and it was fun to be able to work on that. And I was able to work on a number of things at Disney MGM Studios. I worked on Tower of Terror 4, which was the fourth incarnation with the random profiles. And even then we were looking at doing an entirely new Fifth Dimension scene.
Wow.
We were going to have Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis Jr. come out and literally make it the Fifth Dimension. It's just...
People are going to
Aquarius, and they're like, who are these old people? But it's a good example of the audience not necessarily knowing the backstory behind a lot of what we do. And then if you're just getting remnants of it, you might be like, oh, well, why did they do this? And they don't understand that it was part of a larger effort that may not necessarily have gone all the way through. But those were just a couple examples at the studios. And obviously, I did get to work on Pirates and Mansion in some of the enhancements that we did. I got to do the 2007 enhancement at the Mansion, where we added the audio to the stretch room and the blinking wallpaper and the endless staircase and some of those elements. So, and that was after I had done the book. So for me, it was a thrill to finally be able to touch the Mansion and actually contribute something to it, something that was that important. And then early in my career, I got to write the epitaph for the Madame Leota tombstone, and that was a thrill. Just, because Ex Atencio was a personal hero of mine, and once I started doing the books, an actual mentor figure, because I got to spend a lot of time with him. So just the idea that I got to have an epitaph sitting alongside X's was, the thrill of my lifetime. And it was, and it's such a minor thing in the grand scheme of things, but for somebody who grew up loving the Haunted Mansion and loving those witty epitaphs, just to contribute something that sits alongside those other classic ones, was really a thrill.
So did you, if I'm wrong, you can shame me.
I will.
Okay.
And so will they. That's what the internet is for.
The internet is for
Shaming.
Shaming when you're wrong.
Yeah.
We're
not allowed to like Mary Poppins anymore. All of these things I'm learning.
No,
this is why I'm friends with Jason, because the stuff he posts is
you can learn all kinds of stuff.
We're hearing all about Seinfeld.
Let's talk about Seinfeld.
Madame Leota.
Yes.
Let's do that. So am I correct in saying that you worked on her updated headstone?
Yeah, the tombstone. And again, that was something where we went through many iterations. We had versions where there was going to be a piece of statuary that actually started moving. We had versions where it was going to be more of a freshly dug grave where the dirt, the soil would get disturbed. And ultimately we went, I think rightfully so, with the more subtle effect of the face that just kind of looks up and down a little bit and blinks. And then the joy in that became watching families get into fights with one another because the kid's like, no, I swear I moved! Stop lying!
Exactly, because you do see people now. I mean, as much as we go to Disney, see people in line, and you see people that are kind of newbies to the park, and they're like, did she just blink?
Yeah.
And then by the time they get their family to turn around, she's not blinking anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you sat there and you wait, and then
now it's time to go in.
And now it's time to go in, and then you miss, like, they could have missed the whole thing, but that gets people to kind of go back into the line again.
And I mean, that's a hallmark of any great attraction, is having such an abundance of detail that you can literally go on an attraction, and Pirates and Mansion are prime examples. You can go on 20 years after you rode it for the first time and still see things that you've never noticed before. And that's I think, the genius of some of the classics.
So there's a lot of, like the Mansion has, this big following that people just love it. So, like, what do you think that's, like, even, like, diehard fans, no pun intended with diehard fans, but if you...
So like a strange Bruce Willis, right?
It is. Foolish mortals. So, what do you think?
Yippee-ki-yay.
Yippee-ki-yay, foolish mortals. Okay, anyway.
I'm going to copyright that.
Family friendly.
Family friendly. So everybody thinks that they know the stories of the Mansion. Like, and then let's I sidetrack a lot. I'm sorry. So, like, when that movie came out, the Eddie Murphy movie came out. Now, like, us that know, like, the Mansion and stuff, like, that's not really how that went. And like stuff like that. You get people that think they know the story of the Mansion. So, what is the real story behind what's going on at the Haunted Mansion, of the real deal, not Eddie Murphy's version or somebody in a chat room online?
Somebody wants to know if Del Toro's movie's going to come out too.
Yeah, Del Toro. So, like, what's the real deal on the Haunted Mansion?
The funny thing is, it's much more simplistic than you ever would have thought, and it all boils down to. And this seems like it's oversimplifying, but if you want the answer to the question, this is it. It is a retirement home for happy haunts, and it all goes back to that radio interview that Walt did in England when it was post-war, and he said he expressed sympathy for all of the ghosts that had been displaced by these ancient manor houses that had been damaged, in World War II, and he vowed to build a haunted mansion at Disneyland where they could kind of spend their afterlife, their retirement, haunting till their heart's content. And then that made its way into the sign that they put up in front of the Haunted Mansion facade after it was built, inviting ghosts from all over the world to come to Ghost Relations and apply to live in the retirement home at the Haunted Mansion. And because I asked Exitencio about it, I'm like, so how did you arrive at the story such as it is? And he just kind of looked up and he goes, oh, is that sign? I'm like, it was Marty's sign. It's like, because it had been, the facade was there 6 years before the attraction opened. So that's a lot of time for something like that to sink in with at least the local audience.
Yeah.
So that was really what spearheaded that story. And it's obviously very loose. And you can see elements and traces of earlier stories going all the way back to the late 50s and some of the treatments that Ken Anderson wrote. That's where The Bride came from, and the Sea Captain. To this day, there are traces of those stories that survived, but the ultimate official story is just simply that. It's about the retirement home. And one of the reasons we did the book to begin with was because at Imagineering, we'd be walking through Liberty Square, and like there was one point where I literally heard a cast member say, oh yeah, that's the window that the bride jumped out of when she committed suicide on the wedding. I'm like, whoa! Whoa! And then somebody mentioned a love triangle between the bride, the ghost host, and Madame Leota. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like they take a beloved attraction and turn it into...
Now that could be a movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Turn it into like a horrible soap opera.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
like,
so I don't know.
So that was really one of the early motivations behind the book, was to sort of set the record straight and just really say, hey, this is what the story is. This is how the whole attraction came about. And then, when they were working on Disneyland Paris, Tony made more of an effort to really come up with a firmer, more Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 type story. But as far as the original classic mansion, Disneyland and Walt Disney World and Tokyo, it's just simply that retirement home. And I think, and like any great piece of art, whether it's a film, a novel, a TV show, or an attraction, you can see what you want to see in it. Like Tony Baxter did a brilliant job of breaking the Haunted Mansion down into a 3-act structure, where in Act 1 you're kind of going through the house and seeing the effects of the ghost, but you're not seeing the ghost. And then as you get into Act 2 with Madame Leota, they start to materialize and reveal themselves to you. And then in Act 3, when you're primarily in the graveyard, and this makes sense when you think about it, they're now surrounding you on both sides, and you become part of that world. And it's like, and that was just one example of, when I would work with Tony, and like you listen to him for a couple of minutes, you're like, maybe I should take some night classes or something. It's like, Joe Rohde's the same thing. It's like, if you ever want to feel like a complete blockhead, talk to Joe Rohde or Tony Baxter for 15 minutes.
You're like, oh my gosh. So do you think there's misconceptions, like people, like just simple things, like this ghost is named this and this is his story, or people say, and I know this part is kind of true, or true, that they reuse characters in different attractions. Like you might see animatronic, obviously not in the same outfit, but like in Pirates that you're going to see in the Haunted Mansion somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if memory serves, the auctioneer is actually one of the duelists, in Haunted Mansion. And that was because they had the sculpts, they had the molds, and there are things that the average guest is not going to notice and say, "Hey, you cheated."
Right. But then there's like us Disney geeks that go through and you look at every little thing and you might notice. But even so, it doesn't ruin anything. No,
absolutely. Well, I think for the fan, it actually enriches it, because you feel a sense of pride that you found that stuff. And I think for people that do take the deeper dive and look closer, they're rewarded. With that kind of thing, in terms of all the details and things that you might not get on one ride. So
we talked about, before we started this, I was telling you about my fascination with the Hatbox Ghost, because his story is interesting to me. And I'm a Haunted Mansion buff, but I do like the fact that he had this whole aura about him back in when the first mansion opened, and like he was there and he was gone.
Yeah, absolutely. From what I've been able to determine, he was there for previews, before the official opening. And what I've always been told is that because there have been rumors that it was so scary and it was scaring people, and we had to take him out. The effect just a reporter died of a heart attack. It's all nonsense. But the long and the short of it was the effect didn't work. It was a white light, black light effect that would show the head disappearing and then reappearing in the hat box. And I think it was just a number of factors, like the figure's proximity to the ride track and the speed at which you're moving and all that stuff. It just didn't come off. So they pulled it because it didn't work. And then he ultimately returned triumphantly, just a few years ago.
So do you think, just your opinion, of course, because, we don't discuss rumor and such here at the Mystery Mouse. We don't do that. But if we were to do that.
If you were, say, on the internet.
Yes, if we were going to do
that. The World Wide Webs.
So as you're leaving the bride's room and the attic and whatever, and you go out towards like where you're going to go down into the cemetery, you see a big empty spot right there. It says at Disney World, where the Hatbox Ghost is at Disneyland. If you haven't been to the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, as soon as you leave the bride's area, if you look to the right, there he is in all his glory, which I was super excited to see him. Yeah. And I was saying that we had to go ride it twice because my camera didn't work the first time, and I was like, I was such a Disney geek. I was heartbroken. I'm like, no, I didn't come So then I had to get back in line and go do it again because I can go 15 minutes at Disney
Getting very
World.
wound up.
I know,
this whole
right?
thing.
No,
I'm not in any danger.
So do you think?
Let's get Erica in here.
Get Erica.
I need a human shield.
Erica will protect. I think
okay.
Erica would.
So do you think that it's possible? Let's just say possible. There's an empty spot there at the mansion at Disney World. Do you think they could put him in there? Maybe. Oh boy.
Jack doesn't think so.
Jack.
It's the UPS guy, I think.
See, I
He's
already-
delivering the Hatbox Ghost figure.
Yes.
We had it come here first.
And just so you guys know, I already warned him that you guys are very familiar with Jack noises during the show.
He looks exactly like Gary Fisher.
Yeah,
which warms
we
my
have
heart.
a fat little French bulldog just like Carrie Fisher.
No body shaving, please.
No, no fat shaming.
It's inappropriate.
It is inappropriate. So anyway, do you think it's possible or probable or whatever, just your opinion, that they could put the Hatbox Ghost in Disney World?
I think they could, and I think at some point they probably will. I think it also speaks to why you've never seen Haunted Mansion Holiday here. It's a completely different market from Disneyland. You know, Disneyland has, and I'm probably getting these figures wrong, and Diego will text me tomorrow, but it was like 80% local, 20% out of town guests.
Right.
And at Florida, it was always the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about it, as hard as it may be to believe, you still have a ton of people who are coming through these attractions for the first time.
Right.
So there isn't the need to constantly refresh and update because you're catering to that local audience that's there all the time. But I think the Hatbox Ghost is a little bit different because it's become such a beloved part of the lore.
It is.
You know, you could definitely see something like that getting added to the Florida version because, you know, Haunted Mansion got the revised, or Disneyland got the revised Bride and the floating Leota effect first before Florida. And they wound up doing that here, so there's no reason to believe they wouldn't one day do the Hatbox Ghost.
I would love that.
They don't really involve me with those decisions much anymore.
No, but
It's calling me up at Universal is frowned upon.
Well,
I don't know why.
Like the only reason when I had met him a couple of years ago at an event, we had talked about the Hatbox Ghost, and I was like, "Is it okay for me to say it live?" Because there's a lot of people that are curious, and then you get these like the rumor things like you know, oh, I've heard that, you know, next year they're gonna throw the overlay at Disney World, and all that stuff isn't true. It's just a matter of everybody's got something to say about everything. You know, and we try to put out facts.
There are a lot of opinions out there.
There are a lot of opinions.
On the internet.
There is. But, you know, I do think that a little empty spot there, not that anybody cares what I think, but it would be great.
Apparently plenty of people
Well, okay,
care.
okay, some people care. But,
People care.
but
How many?
no, I think it would be
Well,
great.
see, now
Not live right now.
Now I'm spooked.
Don't be spooked. You're
Not live.
spooked.
See what I did there?
Puns. We got puns. Anyway.
That's Ezra. He's not.
I'm sorry.
No, you're okay. No,
Continue, please.
No, I just want to.
What do you have in your notebook?
My notebook.
Your Mike Wallace.
Actually,
notebook.
we wing it here, so my notebook barely says anything. Like I like to keep it.
For a second, I thought I was Diane Sawyer.
No, and we keep it all off the cuff, and we just wing it and just hope for the best.
That's fine.
But
that's
they
how
like
I
that. You guys
approach
like that, right?
most of my life. Well, look at all the hearts.
I know they love
Well,
us.
that's nice.
Isn't it nice? They're loving us.
Yeah. And that's just Erica. I don't know what the other people are doing.
Or they're giving the hearts for Jack because, you know, everyone's like,
Well, he's a delight.
Jack. He is a delight.
And you're slim. I don't care what your mother says. You look good.
Need sound effects.
Oh, need sound effects? We
Are you?
Okay, stop. Go.
He wants to be on.
He was on
fake
camera
television.
last week. He was on
Okay.
camera last week. Okay. So, the Pirates, you also worked on that, so can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Didn't do as much on Pirates in terms of the enhancement. Most of my involvement there was with the book and getting to go to the movie sets. I was on the set of the first 3 in order to do the book, because the original book was about not only the making of the attraction, but the making of the first film. And then when we did the second edition the following year, we touched on Dead Man's Chest a little bit. But Pirates is just an amazing example of everything coming full circle, because you have an attraction that was inspired by the original Swashbucklers that then inspired a movie that then turned into a franchise that in turn influenced the very attraction that it came from.
Well, right, when they added, Captain Jack and the barrel and in the different spots in the ride, I think because Pirates franchise did so well and it's so popular that it was a great addition because it
Yeah.
modernized everything. And like for the kids that go to the Pirates movies, when they're in the ride, it's something to kind of watch for.
Well, it was actually really honestly motivated because the discussions that we had back at that time, it's true that you were suddenly seeing an entire generation of guests whose first frame of reference, when you say Pirates of the Caribbean, they don't think of the ride, they think of the movies, because that was their first exposure to it. That was their kind of gateway into that world. So for them to come to the Disney parks and not see any trace of Captain Jack and Barbossa and some of the other elements, that was a disconnect for them. Yeah. And I think the genius of the team that put that original enhancement together was that, you said it yourself, they're additions, not replacements. And that was a very conscious decision because Pirates, along with Mansion, obviously is one of the crown jewels, and they're very careful about what they do with that. And I thought just the judicious additions of Captain Jack, I think the biggest change, if you will, was taking out the original sea captain and replacing him with Barbossa.
Yes.
But that said, they kept a lot of the original dialogue, like strike your colors, you bloom and cockroaches and stuff. I think Jeffrey Rush did such a marvelous job with that recording that when you emerge into the harbor and you hear that score, it's just natural that you're going to see and hear
going and the
Captain
water
Barbossa.
shooting,
Yeah, it's become a goosebump
it almost
moment.
puts you into the movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it doesn't take away from like the heart of what the attraction's about, because you still have the guy in the well and the whole thing, and then they
poor
have
Carlos.
Yeah, poor Carlos.
Don't be cheap.
Don't be cheap. my kids wait for that part.
Absolutely.
Don't tell him, Carlos. Don't be cheap. Anyway, so Disney geeks. Sorry.
Somebody is asking online, have you met Johnny Depp?
Yeah. In the course of doing interviews for the book and being on the film set, and then I actually got to direct him for The Legend of Captain Jack Sparrow, which was an attraction that was in Soundstage 4 prior to the big transformation into Toy Story Land. And that was absolutely unbelievable, because it's like to get to write for and then actually direct the performance of Johnny in the Captain Jack role was one of the most thrilling days of my life, because you go in and you're just like, this is one of the greatest actors of his generation, one of the biggest box office stars in the world. What am I going to say to him? But what you quickly discover is, like, I don't think I've ever met someone more humble, because in reality, he turned out to be just like any other actor I've ever worked with, which is he wants to do the material as prepared, and he wants you to help him get there, and he wants you to get what you want.
Right.
And there was one point where we were behind the scaffolding, the platform that was serving as the deck of the Black Pearl, and it was just Johnny, me, and James Arnold Taylor, who did the voice of the talking skull, and he's a really close friend.
Star Wars
so
guy.
we talk about that all the time, that, oh my God, we got to sit with Johnny and improvise and actually, spitball and kind of come up with dialogue and everything. And there was one point where he said, I said, oh, you should call Davy Jones a vile squid man. He goes, oh yes, that's great, I'll use that. and you're sitting there going,
oh my God,
Johnny thinks I came up with something cool. And but it was a surreal experience. I remember the first thing we did was we walked him through the whole show. So we had a little animatic for him to watch and storyboards and things. And our producer, Sharita Carter, who's a delightful person, just kind of walked him through the whole thing. And then when she was done, he had to go get ready and go get into costume. And he kind of puts his, he went to go say goodbye to her, and she walks toward him, and I think she tripped on a cable or something, and literally collapsed into him in a big hug. So, she's on cloud 9 and everything. And then he kind of looks at me, and I just look at him, I go, we don't have to hug. And he goes, and why not? Sometimes you have to unleash your inner hairy man. And I'm like, I have no idea what that means, and I don't want it explained to me. But then he pulled me into a big bear hug.
Oh, yes, because
he's a hugger.
Which is great.
It was.
But how awesome
Very romantic.
Is that?
It was unbelievable.
How awesome is that? Not everybody, actually most people cannot say that they've worked with Johnny Depp and have...
aside from Tim Burton.
Tim Burton's worked with him quite a bit too. But I mean, to be able to say that you creatively collaborated and did those things, I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was a lot. That was a highlight,
Oh, yeah.
I think between that and getting to pitch Star Tours to George Lucas at Skywalker Ranch, those are two of the greatest days of my life. And because it's like you still, there's part of you that is still a fan of these people and these things, and you don't really turn that up. I mean, you have to keep it together to function as a professional, but I think, you want to take these little mental snapshots, because those things don't come along every day, and most of the people that I've worked with to this day never take that sort of thing for granted. The people that we get to collaborate with and some of the things we get to do, and it is a privilege, and whether it's Pirates of the Caribbean or Star Wars, I mean, to work on anything bearing that name and to work with George Lucas and to get to pitch to him and get his feedback and everything, it's just, you're not going to top that if you grew up like a lot of us did, loving film and television and theme parks and pop culture.
So let me ask you this. So being that you were a fan and you get to do all these awesome jobs, do you ever, like, let's say the night before, you know that you're going to go talk to George Lucas or work with Johnny Depp, do you ever feel nervous about doing that, or you just go in and like, I'm just gonna do what I gotta do?
I just make an appointment with Dr. Smirnoff and everything's fine.
I mean,
That's how I get by.
I would be so sick to my stomach.
Just stop.
I would be so sick to my stomach if it were me. I'd be like, oh.
No, I mean, there is that element, but then there's also the element of, you have a job to do, and you need to do it. And if you want to continue doing it, you better,
Exactly. So you gotta hold it together.
Yeah.
Even if you were a super fan, you're like, let's hold it together and get through it. And then when you leave, you can go like, but then not.
Yeah, I've only been starstruck twice in my life, and one was with Keira Knightley on the set of Dead Man's Chest. I was on the soundstage on the Disney lot when they were shooting the scene toward the beginning where I think Will's in jail and she comes to visit him and everything. But I was talking to the publicist. He's like, "Oh, Kira's coming down, so we'll introduce you, and that way you'll get to know her, and then you'll do your interviews or whatever." So literally, it could not have been more cliche. The big soundstage, elephant doors open, so it's like bright California sunlight streams into the soundstage, backlighting her, and she's in a wedding dress.
Oh my gosh!
And it was just like, you're just waiting
Build
for
up,
the angelic chorus. And I'm just sitting there like my jaw hit the ground, and she walks up and the publicist says, "Oh, this is Jason. He's writing the making of book." And she, "What is Jack doing?"
Drinking water. He just doesn't even care.
He's incredibly rude.
He is incredibly rude, but thank God they expect it. He has no manners.
Absolutely. He's a member of the show.
He is. So Keira Knightley, and who was the other one that you got?
Harrison Ford.
Oh, well, Harrison Ford. Yeah.
That was I went up to the Aviation Hall of Fame in Dayton, Ohio, and he was there to host that year's induction ceremony to the Hall of Fame. And there were a number of astronauts and folks that were being inducted, so there were a lot of the original astronauts there. And that was the same year we were opening Mission Space at Epcot. Wow. So I got a bunch of Imagineering swag, and some of them, like Buzz Aldrin, I think it was, they were actually consultants on the ride. So I went to the head of marketing for the Hall of Fame, and I said, "Hey, I brought all this stuff, and so I would love to hand out these hats to you and your staff and the astronauts, and Mr. Ford, of course. Never miss an angle, kids. That's important.
Take your opportunity if it's there."
So we were waiting in a hallway, not knowing when this was going to happen. All of a sudden, these double doors blow open, and there's this huge entourage walking through, and there's Indiana Jones in the center of it. And the marketing guy was there too, and I blurted out, I go, "Ron, the hats!" And they all stop, and Harrison just goes, and I'm like, "Oh my God, Han Solo's looking at me right now." And then the head of marketing goes, "Well, give it to him." And it's like, that was so not how I expected the whole thing to go down. So I was kind of shaking a little bit, so I grabbed this Mission Space hat, and I just kind of walked up, and I literally, if the camera is Harrison Ford, I kind of go like this and hand it out. And no joke, this is verbatim. I said, "Mr. Ford, Jason, Disney hat." And he took it out of my hand, and he goes, "Well, thank you very much." And it's like, I turned into like a middle school girl. And I'm not ashamed.
And you shouldn't be. So before we take viewer questions, let's just touch for a second about you were on the set of the Avengers.
Yes.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, that was interesting too because I used to write for D23 magazine. So when Disney acquired Marvel, D23 called me and said, we want you to write like a Marvel 101. Like, we want, because not every Disney fan is necessarily a Marvel fan, so we would love to have you do an overview of the company and the whole history and everything. So as part of that, I got to interview Stan Lee, and I went out to California. And so I had a phone interview arranged with Kevin Feige. So I was in the Glendale office at the time, and he was on speakerphone. And I was a little nervous, and the publicist is like, okay, hold the line for Mr. Feige. And I'm just like, And he gets on the line, and he goes, Jason Surrell. And I went, yeah? And he goes, I own the Haunted Mansion from the Magic Kingdom of the movies. I own Pirates of the Caribbean from the Magic Kingdom of the movies. I own the Disney Mountains, Imagineering at its peak. I'm a big fan.
You're like,
and I was like,
who's interviewing
well,
you?
I'm a fan of yours. And then the ultimate testimony was the publicist who normally stands on the line as like a hawk goes, because I said, well, I didn't see that coming. And then the publicist goes, yeah, I didn't either. I'm going to jump off. I think you guys will be fine.
Oh.
So we do this great interview. And at the end of it, as a joke, I said, if you need anybody to write the Making of the Avengers book, I'll throw my hat into the ring. And he goes, I'll keep that in mind. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that's something you say. 2 weeks later, I get a call from an editor from Marvel in New York. And he goes, yeah, I understand you're writing the Making of the Avengers book. And I'm like, I am? And he goes, well, yeah, Kevin Feige said you were. And I said, well, I guess I am. And that's how that came about. And so I did all my interviews, and the set visits happened to coincide with, by the time we made that deal, I think the filming that they had done in New Mexico was complete. So I just said, oh, well, I'll catch up with you in Cleveland, which is where I'm from. And that's where they staged a lot of the Battle of New York.
Really?
So I got to go to the set in Cleveland, and then I did a follow-up set visit when they were in New York. So I was on set for the final scene in Central Park where Thor and Loki go back to Asgard. I was there on Fifth Avenue where the Quinjet crashes, and Cap and Hawkeye and Black Widow go running toward Stark Tower. That was amazing too, because there was one point I'm watching them light the fires and get the scene ready, and from behind me I hear a female voice say, "Can we get a picture with you?" And it was this sexy, sultry voice. I'm like, oh, some fans asking Chris Evans for a picture. So I turn around, and it was Scarlett Johansson asking Stan Lee
if they
could get a picture with him. It was the cutest thing. So it's like Stan posing with Scarlett and Chris and Jeremy. Yeah, it was really, really crazy. And I got to watch the Stan Lee cameo that got cut from the film. Originally, that waitress that works in that restaurant that you see a little bit at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
For the longest time, there was
she was in was it Family Ties with Michael J. She was or Growing Pains. She was the little girl in the 80s.
Was she really?
Yeah, that was her.
Okay, fun fact.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And he's on the board.
Marvel's my stuff.
But that was going to be a bigger role. You were actually going to see her a little bit more. And there was a scene where Steve Rogers is sitting there sketching in his little book, and she kind of gives him his bill and says, "Oh, you can no rush. You can stay here all day if you want." And she's clearly flirting with him.
Yeah.
And then as she walks away, Stan is at the neighboring table. He leans in and he goes, "Get her number, you moron!"
That's awesome.
And they wound up cutting it, but it was just to watch that up close was unbelievable. And then just the scene at the end, where Thor and Loki go back to Asgard, being in Central Park and getting to see that, all of those people in costume was just, because in that moment you're in that reality. You're like, oh, holy crap, there's Thor, and Robert Downey Jr. was there, and he was just fantastic. He's everything you want him to be. And I got a picture with him, and I'm like, okay, a picture with Robert Downey Jr. is cool. A picture with Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark is cooler.
It is.
Because he is Tony Stark.
He is Tony Stark. And Mark Daniel is on, and he says...
Mark Daniel.
He said, Jason, that's my man.
Yeah, Mark Daniel is fantastic. We were talking before, Mark and I go way back in the entertainment department in the early, I don't remember the decade. But yeah, we worked at Disney MGM Studios together.
See, and I was telling him, Mark, what a wonderful guest you were on the show, and I said all nice things.
And no, I mean, a nicer guy you will not.
He is a wonderful guy.
And he's perfectly cast in the role that he is. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better representative of Disney.
See, we love you, Mark.
And today he was hanging out with the Patriots.
And today you got to go hang out with the Patriots.
As one does.
Yeah.
When one is Mark Dan.
On a normal Monday.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
Yeah, that's Monday for Mark. It's a thrill of a lifetime for everybody else. Mark's
Mark's is
It's a Monday.
Well, I just happened to look down and I saw him on, so I didn't mean to interrupt. I was like, oh, hey, Mark says hi.
Hey, Mark.
So meeting, everybody was going absolutely nuts about you meeting the Avengers.
Mark said love you guys.
We love you too, Mark.
Love you too, Mark.
Love you too, Mark. That's a huge thing because I had asked them. No, they know that my quirks. Loki, I'm a Loki fangirl. I love Tom Hiddleston. I love Loki, and I was afraid to ask you if he was a nice guy in person.
Oh my God, yeah, he was absolutely delightful. He was so great with everybody. He would actually go up to the barricades and take pictures and sign autographs with fans, and he's in full Loki costume. And even during the interview, like the interview ran way over, and the publicist, I feel like I'm trashing publicists, I don't mean to, but they're like, oh, you're done, you don't have to answer anymore. And he's like, no, I'm enjoying talking to you. Just a delightful person. And
Delightful.
This was during his rise, and there was one point, like when I was walking away from him, I turned around, I go, by the way, this and Woody Allen in 1 year. And then he goes, because he was in Midnight in Paris, and then he goes, I'm Steven Spielberg. And I'm like, because he was in War Horse. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that. And then he goes, I know, right? So it's like so humble, like even he couldn't believe what was happening to him.
And that is the best, when people actually are genuinely appreciative and humble and know that the job that they have is just once in a lifetime.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
people,
And they're aware of it. Like Chris Evans takes the role of Cap very seriously. And it's funny because like in the past couple of years, he's essentially, if you look on social media, he's become Captain America. We've collectively decided, you know what? He is Captain America.
You are Captain America.
And Chris Hemsworth was just a joy, because like I arrived on the set and immediately the producer Jeremy Latcham said, okay, I want to introduce you to Chris. So we go right into the street, and they had just filmed a fight scene, and it was the moment where they're watching Iron Man fall out of the sky.
Oh, God.
So, Chris is swinging Mjolnir and, Cap's there, and they're like looking up. So they yell cut, and because they've been doing a fight scene, like he's got fake blood, dirt, sweat, the whole nine, and he comes off, and we just dove right in. I literally arrived 2 minutes earlier, and Jeremy goes, Chris! This is Jason. He's a Disney Imagineer, and he's writing the Art Of book. And he goes, come here, mate, and take a look at this shot. I turn him into the crocodile hunter.
Crikey.
Crikey, mate.
So then they jumped on Loki right there.
Look at them. Look at them. They're the Chitauri, mate. Then he goes, come here, mate. Let's take a look at the shot. And he throws an arm the size of a small child around my neck and drags me into the video village. And like Joss Whedon's turning around like, who the hell's the bald guy? And why is he in my video village? He's like, look at this. And I'm like so shell shocked. I'm just like, yeah, that's some good fighting, It's like, it's gonna be great. And then we're walking out, and right then the girl from Craft Surfaces walks by with this giant tray of these big greasy breakfast sandwiches. And he goes, mate, you gotta try one of these. And he grabs two of them off the tray, and then if you're me, he goes, and like I had just had a full breakfast like less than an hour earlier, but when the God of Thunder presents you with a breakfast sandwich, you take the sandwich.
So was it a good sandwich?
It was amazing. And then I went and threw up.
Oh my God! Like, what do you do? That's a whole lot coming at you.
No, there's not a debate. Because first of all, Chris Hemsworth is like a building with feet.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
And when the sandwich is, it's like he might as well have had the hammer.
Right.
But it was
Did you get to hold the hammer? Did you get to hold the hammer?
I did get to hold the hammer.
Oh my God.
So you are worthy.
You are worthy.
Yes, that's all nonsense.
That's just on set when the Hulk comes out and he grabs Tony and saves
that
him.
is just for your audience. It's fiberglass. No, but it's great because you go into to the prop area. Like there's the shield, there's the hammer, and it's it was pretty cool.
So I have another sidebar. So when you get to go to these sets and see these things, is it kind of how like when I get to do cover stuff at Disney, like when I get past a certain spot, put your phones away, no cameras, no this and that, so you can't take pictures. Can you take pictures on the sets besides the posed ones? Can you? Or
I really don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, okay. I was just curious.
It's very strict, and you shouldn't take pictures.
Okay, but
No, it's like you're not taking pictures of anything sensitive or
right,
anything. But
right,
yeah,
right.
I took a picture with some of the props and things.
Okay, because I've seen your pictures with, like you said, like with Robert Downey Jr. and Tom Hiddleston, and you know, which you're so lucky.
So you got them all, but I never heard you say anything
You're
about
so
them.
lucky. That's probably going to be the closest thing I ever get to meet Tom Hiddleston.
Yeah, we'll make some calls.
Oh my god!
We're gonna make dreams come true.
I would die and embarrass myself at the same time.
The other funny thing was, like, I was watching the Chris's, and that's a whole lot of good looking in one frame.
Jesus.
But they were shooting one of those little Disney Channel promos, you know, one of those nonsense things they do. I can say that now. So it's like this little kid, like, interviewing or whatever. It's like a little teeny bopper type kid. And they're doing their little bits, and Chris Hemsworth is taking it very seriously and trying to answer, and Chris Evans is like cracking wise and not taking it seriously at all. And I'm out of frame and just laughing at everything he says. And then he kind of looks at me like, "Oh, that guy gets it. I'm going to play to him." You know, so he's making all these like inappropriate jokes, and it's for the Disney Channel.
Oh my god!
And then at the end, they're like, the host goes, "Oh, okay, well, I think we got it. Is there anything else?" And then the producer goes, "Well, yeah, why don't we pick up a shot of you thanking them for doing this?" And then Chris Evans, you know, who's from Boston, in his full Boston accent, he goes, "Yeah, how about a thank you here?" And it's like to see Captain America suddenly, you know, talking like he's in Goodwill Hunting in the costume. And then he used a word in front of thank you that is not appropriate for the family audience, but it made it much funnier.
I bet it did. I bet it did. This is fantastic, and they're loving your stories. I mean, they just from the little bit that I've been able to read, they are loving your stories. I told you guys this was gonna be fun. All right, so do you want to pull some questions really quick, or?
I'm just listening to these great.
Hey, see,
Marvel
Scott's
stories
not
right
paying
now.
attention. He's listening to the stories.
I guess I should look over.
You might want to do that. So.
Actually, nobody said anything yet. Well, they may.
Yes, I've seen questions.
I
I've
believe they're
seen them.
making another one of those Avengers pictures.
Are they really?
I had heard something about
Heard
it.
something
Yeah.
about
Well,
that.
if you get called to do that book, and you need somebody to carry your jacket or the sandwich when Thor
Yeah.
hands it to you, I'll
breakfast
pay for
sandwich.
both our airfare.
There will be sandwiches.
Oh my
I will be
goodness.
there in a heartbeat.
It was harder to lift the sandwich than it was the
Yeah,
head,
that's a heavy
actually.
sandwich.
Okay.
So when Hella breaks into it, not that big of a deal.
Not that big of a deal.
Okay, I have a question, personal question. It's kind of a funny question.
Okay.
I'll decide if it's funny.
From the queue line at the Haunted Mansion,
Uh-huh.
and you got the family busts.
Mhm.
Aunt Florence, is that based off Chris Farley? It looks just like Chris Farley.
Did you notice that?
No, this is new to me. Actually, a good friend of mine sculpted those, Pete
Okay.
Carcillo, who's also at Universal now,
Okay.
working with us. And Pete is just a genius sculptor. He actually apprenticed under Blaine Gibson, so it doesn't get any better than that. I will have to ask him around the office. I doubt Chris Farley came up, but you never know.
Chris Farley is the lunch lady. That
It
face
really
is
does.
identical.
I mean, it really
yeah,
does.
you put that wig. You put a wig on Chris, and that
Next
was,
time
he
you
could've
look
played
at them, you'd be like, oh shoot.
Yeah, now you're gonna
really
see it when you
does.
go and be like, what is Chris Farley?
I will bring that up with Pete, and I will probably get the look that I just gave you.
Probably.
Probably. Because I didn't realize it until he said the one day. Because, we go a lot to the parks. It's like, you know who that looks like, right? He goes, the lunch lady, Chris Farley. And I'm like, a little bit. So now when we walk by, we're like, oh, Chris Farley.
Find it in the book, page 47. Show me a picture now.
Now I have to revise it again.
I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm sorry. If you had questions, ask them again because we're going to have to go through a ton of comments
And
to find
Kimberly
them.
wants to know, how do you become a theme park show writer? Because I'm curious about the answer to that.
Yeah, Kimberly wants to know, how do you do that?
Well, in my case, it literally went back to that character greeting that we did for Epcot. And it was one of those things where, like, I could always write well, but I never thought I would be a writer, you know. And then when we did that first show at Epcot, and then when I started pitching some of the shows, the little backlot tour enhancements and some of the things that I did at Disney MGM Studios, I kind of just became a de facto writer, and then I just became a writer. And, I mentioned that when I interviewed with Universal, they're just looking at a resume that had like 3 years of these little things that I'd done. But again, when you put it on paper, and after several years have passed, it looks like you have experience. And then after a while, you're literally like, oh, I guess I'm a writer.
I'm a writer now.
And then from that, there was a natural evolution into directing. And then from there, creative direction, which is in our world, I was a show director in live entertainment, and then creative director is kind of the equivalent on the attraction side, where you're just the creative lead on your project.
Gotcha. I hope that answers that a little bit. Oh, go ahead.
And I had the other question too. In your book, the foreword's done by Marty Sklar and Tom Fitzgerald, and you mentioned Xavier earlier, and Xavier and Marty are two of my all-time favorites because they got to work with Walt. I mean, that's what to me is amazing. But what was it? Because I'm assuming you worked with Marty to know for him to write the foreword.
Yeah, X had already retired. You know, it's like I consider myself third generation Imagineering, and my mentor Mike West was second generation. So when he started, a lot of those guys were still around. So he got to work with X and Claude Coates and a lot of the original Imagineers. And I would say for half of my time or so at Imagineering, Marty was still there running the place. So I did get to work under him and for him, and he wrote the foreword to the book because he was the living link to Walt, and you know, he was the one that helped bring the book about, because I had the idea, and I asked our local VP in Florida, how do we go about pitching a book? And he goes, I don't know, email Marty. So I did, and Marty said, all right. I said, you know, we have the movie coming out next year. And maybe because they typically do tie-in merchandise, we can do this book that's really a biography of the attraction, but we're going to use the movie as the vehicle to get it out there, because there's obviously a lot more promotion that goes behind the films. And he said, okay, write me a book proposal. I'm like, great. How do I do that?
Yeah, how do you
know,
do
I had no
that?
idea. So I just wrote up a book proposal like I would a treatment for anything else. And so I sent it to him. He had some notes. We went back and forth a little bit, and he goes, okay, now I want you to write a proposal letter to our publishing unit in New York. I'm like, great. How do I do that? You know, because I'd never done that. So basically I just took what would be a verbal pitch, you know, for one of our projects, and put it in a letter, sent it to Marty, and he goes, okay, I just sent the whole thing to New York. Wait to hear from them. And then 2 weeks later, New York called and said, okay, the good news is we want to do this. The bad news is, for it to come out with the movie, we need the manuscript in January. And this was like end of August. So it was like, oh, geez. But he was really the godfather of that book. And at the same time, I pitched Pirates at the exact same time, because that movie hadn't come out yet either. And it was funny because like the editors were like, yeah, we kind of got burned on the last two Bruckheimer books, so we don't really want to do that. I'm like, I think this one might be a little different. And then the next summer, right as the movie was passing 300 million, I get a call, and they're like, you know, we're really kind of disappointed that we didn't do the Pirates book. And I went, really? That's fascinating.
Wow, my purse is double.
Yeah, so that's how both of those came about. But yeah, Marty was an absolute mentor figure because he started as a writer. So there was that link as well. And you know, when I was out there years later working on Star Wars, you know, every once in a while I'd call him up and we would go have lunch there in Burbank, and that was just the thrill of a lifetime. Like, first of all, just the fact that the guy knows your name is huge.
Yes.
You know, and then just to sit with him, and I would hear his stories, and then I would bring him back to Imagineering where his car was, and he'd pat my leg and he goes, "Thank you, Jason. We'll do this again."
Oh my God.
You know, and the other goosebump moment like that was when the Pirates book came out. I figured Disney would send books to all the people that were in it.
Yeah.
And there was a point where Marty goes, he emails me, or no, he called me, and he sounded like pissed. And he's like, did you send a book to X? And I'm like, well, no, I thought the company would do that. Well, you didn't get one, and you know, don't you think that's disrespectful? And like, and I'm like, you know, near tears and everything.
Yeah.
So like, I sent him one, and then a week later, I'm driving home, and my cell phone rings, and it says Ex Atencio, and that is enough to, you know, you drive off.
Yeah, drive off the road. Yeah.
So I pick it. I go, "Hi, X." I was, "Oh, Jason, I just wanted to thank you for the book. Between this and Haunted Mansion, you've become like my personal publicist." You know, because those guys didn't get a whole lot of attention back in the day. And then so he's kind of going on and on about it. And then I'll never forget, he ended with, he goes, "Jason, you're a good boy."
Oh my God.
And like, I literally, my eyes welled up and I almost drove into a lamppost. And then like the week after that, all of the executives were down for a big summit meeting of some kind in Florida, and we were having this group lunch at the Nine Dragons in the China Pavilion, and I saw Marty, and he kind of smiled at me. I go up, I go, "You scared the hell out of me. I thought you were really mad." And he just looks at me, he goes, "You sent him the book, didn't you?" You could have just asked.
You could have asked,
and I would have done it. You know.
No, but I like our goosebumps. That's
well, no, we at D23 we saw Marty at one of the places, and then I don't remember seeing. I don't think X was there,
No.
but they both passed away shortly after.
Right in
the
that
last
same
D20
window,
thing.
and it's
Yeah, it was
like
a
what a
month and
huge
half
loss to
apart.
the Disney community because of, and then like same thing with Stan Lee. You know, like these people become such a pillar of you know your fandoms that you know.
And they're also they were the last living links to Walt, because I got to get really close to Harriet Burns, who was the first female Imagineer, the founder of the model shop, and I'll never forget. I drove out to her house in Santa Barbara, and it was like 10 in the morning. She opens the door, and she's got like suit, the scarf, her hair's done up. She looks better at 10 in the morning than I'm gonna look in my life. You know, and just such a classy lady, and just so unbelievably sweet. And there's one point she just looked at me, she goes, you know, Walt would have loved you and everything you're doing. And I'm just like, oh my God, yeah, because like she knew Walt, you know. And the other thing too, not to get all weird, but it's like her and X and a number of the other Imagineers as part of the Pirates book, because he passed away shortly before the opening, that had to be dealt with. So I asked them about it, and both of them teared up when they were talking about it. It was like they were right back there. They still call him Walt. They still refer to him as though he was still alive. And I'll never forget, I was doing a book signing at the Magic Kingdom, and for the Pirates book, and someone came and said, you know, I read this in the hotel last night, and I cried at the part, you know, in the section where you dealt with Walt's death. And I kind of went, good. And she's like, what do you mean good? And I'm like, because that was kind of the point. I was trying to convey the emotion that I experienced when you get it from the people that lived through that day and the confusion that followed, and, you know, what was going to happen and everything. But yeah, like other than Bob Gurr and Alice Davis and, you know, Rowley and a couple of people, you know, they're gone. And that was one of the main motivations for these books, was trying to preserve some of that history. And you know, because at Imagineering there's a great oral tradition. It sounds corny, but it's like that body of knowledge in each discipline is handed down from one generation to the next. And I got it from Mike West, who got it from Exotencio, who got it from Walt and Marty, you know. And it's like that's how these things sort of keep going.
And that's fascinating. I mean, it is just, I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. I
wrote to Xavier years ago, because it said if you wrote him that he may send you an autographed card back. And I never got it, but I used to check the mail every day. I was like, come on, one day I hope it shows up.
I forgot that.
I love that we end with a story of disappointment.
It just was.
But I got Jason here in my house.
That's right. So there's that.
I have a question for Erica.
Yeah, they're installing a plaque.
I have two questions as well.
I have one from Erica that she jumped and sent me a personal message.
Okay, go ahead.
And she's my boo.
She is your boo. And she just told me, she said, I'm the best ever if I ask you this question. And I don't know if you have the answer to it or not. But she said, do you know if they will ever bring back the Happy Haunts Ball at the Haunted Mansion?
Oh, yeah, the merchandise event. I don't know. I would think that with the sort of proliferation of mansion merchandise, there's clearly an audience for it. It's not judging. I wouldn't be surprised if there was another. I don't know if she means the Happy Haunts Ball specifically, but they did 3 of those, and then they did other events years later under a different name. But I think in general, I personally wouldn't be a bit surprised if you saw another Haunted Mansion themed merchandise.
How awesome would that be too?
Okay, that's one of my. I have 3 questions.
Okay, and I have 2. So we'll do one of mine. Rachel wants to know. I'd like to know who you had the most fun working with, since you've had the opportunity to work with so many talented people.
Michelle right now. No.
Michelle,
you're watching it unfold right now.
I wish.
We're making magic right now.
That's right.
Sorry, I had to do that. And actually, Erica just chimed in the dinner party is what she was asking about. The ball dinner party.
Oh, yeah, because at one of those events, you could actually have dinner in the stretch room. I did one where you had dinner in the stretch room.
Can you imagine? It would be awesome. So.
Well, I can't.
You can. You were. I'm talking to him.
I just recall.
It's a call.
We're gonna do it tomorrow. I'm taking a sandwich in my pocket.
You can do it anytime you want.
Yeah,
we're having dinner in the
you can go have dinner at the Haunted Mansion.
Just open up a card table and DIY.
So anyway, who was the most fun that you've worked with?
In terms of, it would probably have to be Johnny, because that was kind of a once in a lifetime thing, you know, and just not only the interaction with him and discovering that he's just like a humble actor looking to make what's on the page work. But just the way we went about it and everything. I mean, he makes you feel like $1 million. And but in terms of fun, it was fun to improvise with him and work through things with him. And it's funny because there was one point where we had one of the veterans from the film, this guy Peter, who was like our technical director. So he was the one behind the camera, making sure everything worked for special effects and all that. And I dealt more with the performance and the story delivery and everything. So we did this one thing where Johnny did the take, and Peter had this confused expression on his face. He goes, "What was that line?" And I said, "Oh, well, Johnny said this." And he goes, "Is that what you wrote?" And I'm like, "No." And he goes, "Well, what did you write?" So I read him the line that I wrote, and he kind of sits there and he goes, well, I like your way better. And I'm like, I do too, but it's Johnny Depp. And then he goes, well, go tell him. I'm like, what?
You want me to go tell him?
So I literally, so I go up and I go, hey, Johnny, it's great, it's fantastic. Could we just try one with this line? You know, and he goes, oh, sure. You know, in that faux British accent he seemed that the boy from Kentucky adopted. So then he did it as written, and then you could see it. He goes, that way's better, use that.
Oh.
So but I loved being told, well, go tell him.
You go tell him.
You go tell him.
You go tell him.
Johnny Depp.
Because one of us is making a lot of money here today, and it ain't me.
Well, I hope, Rachel, that answers your question, because that's a pretty good answer.
And the George Lucas pitch was amazing. It almost got me fired, I think, because like we take this 45-minute pitch, you know, we're taking them through the whole ride and everything. And one of the things during development that I'd been kind of stubbornly adamant about, to the dismay of Tom Fitzgerald, was I said, well, we're not going to Hoth, because that doesn't make a bit of sense. This is episode 3.5. They don't even know where that planet is. It's secret. It's not even, you know, it's not even on the radar. Right. So at some point they said, well, we have to have Hoth. And I'm like, all right, well, we're not having walkers, because that hasn't happened yet. So we can go shushing down the slopes. We can encounter stampeding tauntauns, face a wampa, but we can't have walkers. So they're like, okay, the nerd says we can't have walkers. So like we go through 45 minutes of this whole pitch, and at the end they go, and George was about where you are, and I'm standing right here. And at the end they're like, so what do you think? And George just goes, great, I love it. You know, I did have one question though. Like, you know, I know you're going to Hoth. Yeah, I was seen on Hoth, and you know, there's no walkabout. I just thought, you know, if you're going to Hoth, I think people are going to expect to see a walkabout. And so I was just wondering, you know, why there's no walkabout. He's getting a lot of mileage out of the words walkabout. So then Tom Fitzgerald looks at me and he goes, well, the reason there's no walker battle is because some people on the team felt that wouldn't make sense given the time in which the story takes place. And then it's dead silent. And George just goes, who cares?
And that was it.
And then I look at him and I go, well, I thought you did. And then there's dead silence. And I'm like, not many people can point to the moment where their career ends. But I think this is it. And there's dead silence, and then all of a sudden he goes, and then everyone started laughing. I'm like, oh, thank God. But like we learned a valuable lesson, or I did, which was sometimes fun should win. And years later, well, this was just earlier this year actually, I was in the offices of a design group that we had hired to do some work with us. And the writer at that company quoted that story back to us.
Really?
And like as though it was this industry lore. And he goes, so the moral of the story is, do you want to be right or do you want to go to Hoth? And I look at him and I go, you know that was me, right? And he goes, what? And I'm like, yeah, that happened to me. That was me. And he goes, oh my God, I didn't know it was, you know, I knew it had happened, but I didn't know it was
You're
you.
welcome.
But no, you're welcome, America. But it is a valuable lesson. It's like, do you want to be right or do you want to go to Hoth? And what I said to him was, I found a way to do both. But no, it's like, that was me being too rigid and adhering too closely to a story. And George was absolutely right. It's like the audience would expect to see that and they'd be disappointed if they didn't. I just learned it the hard way.
See, but I was like you though. I'm thinking, well, George is going to want his story. The opera has to be told the way he envisioned it, and he can't play off of that at all. I mean,
who cares?
So I would even think, yeah, who cares? Okay, well, fine.
Like,
well,
all right.
And I'm like, my world is collapsing.
There's Wookiees here too. No,
Yeah,
You're supposed to care.
he walks and everything's on
You know what? Throw in short round while we're at it.
Why not? Here too.
Okay, you go ahead.
Okay, my next question was, I had two. Which side of the great movie ride do you prefer, cowboy or gangster?
Oh.
I love the gangster scene. It's just the shootout is so cool. The downside is then you don't get the building blowing up. So there's pluses to both. But I was always a Muggsy guy.
Me too.
Mm-hmm. Did you make you feel a little sad when they closed the Great Movie Ride, or are you okay with them retiring it?
The funny thing is, like, whenever you talk about things going away or things being retired or replaced, and it always kills me because you always have the people going, Walt would not stand for this, when in reality, Walt would be the first person to rip something out, close something down, replace something. So I get it. And with the pacing of the attraction, it was kind of its time. But I was sorry to see it go, and then it was that same year at Universal that Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure was retired as well. And I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, it's all going away.
Yeah.
So it was weird, but I think if you kind of take what you do seriously and want to try to keep up with the times and provide the best experience for the guests, you just sort of accept that as part of what happens.
Things have to evolve, like Walt said, you keep moving forward because you have to. And I think a lot of times when we put out news, people forget that, or we'll get they like to shoot the messenger sometimes when, no offense guys, but when you put stuff out and people they don't like what's happening, Walt would be rolling over in his grave. Well, no, probably not, because Walt would want to see progress. He'd want to see things change. I mean,
and it's funny because it's also, you're a product of your time and your experience. So when I was growing up, I would read the E-Ticket magazine that the Jansen brothers did, and I'd be like, God, these guys are getting really wound up about Disneyland in the 50s. Don't they love the new Fantasyland? New was in 1982 or 83. Sorry, 83. I'll get called on it. But now, as things have changed at Walt Disney World, I find myself going, I liked it when it was in the 70s and blah, blah, blah. But I think every generation gets their own cool things that they get to call their own. Like, I treasure the fact that I got to have the Magic Kingdom and Epcot of the 70s and into the 80s. I love that I got to grow up with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg in their prime. Not that people can't appreciate Jaws or the Star Wars or Indiana Jones films now, but there was something about being around when those things were in their heyday in the theater. And that's something that no one can ever take away from you, because it's part of it becomes part of your DNA in a way. And I think that's what people lament when they get upset about something closing or replaced or whatever.
True. Hey, what else you got over there?
I have two more, because another one just popped up that I want the answer to. I know you might have the answer, but we'll go with this other one from Corey first.
Okay, Corey.
Corey wants to know, what's your favorite attraction that you had absolutely no input in?
Oh, Indiana Jones Adventure.
Oh.
Absolutely. I think Indiana Jones Adventure and Twilight Zone Tower of Terror are two modern classics. And Indiana Jones, obviously, we just talked about growing up with those movies. I have never felt more like I was in a movie than when I wrote Indy for the first time. It's like the music, the visceral action. Tony Baxter and his team, they put in all of those emotional touchstones that you would expect. It's the snakes, the boulder, the hat, the John Williams music cues, and it's also one of the greatest lessons I've learned in terms of theme design, because Tony tells a story about how when that attraction came about, he said, okay, if we're going to have an attraction based on Indiana Jones, what would the average person absolutely expect to see and actually be disappointed if it wasn't in there? And it's like, we got to have the hat, we got to have the whip, we got to have snakes, we got to have this, we got to have rats and bugs and all that stuff. And that's something that I've carried to this day. I've employed that at Disney and at Universal. I did it on Race Through New York starring Jimmy Fallon. It's okay, we're doing a Tonight Show experience. What would people absolutely expect to see? And it's like, we got to have hashtag, we have to have tight pants, we have to have the ragtime gals. So those principles of themed entertainment and storytelling are applicable no matter what company you're working for or where in the industry you are. It's just, we work largely in a business of adaptation a lot of the time, especially today where so much is IP driven, because the audience knows that there's that instant familiarity, it's more marketable. But that also means that there are certain things that you are responsible for if you want to be a good steward of some of these characters and stories. You certainly see that at Universal with Harry Potter. You know, we are absolutely all about honoring that body of work, that mythology, and people take it, as you know, very seriously, and you want to deliver on that. And I think a lot of us, you know, working in this field feel that responsibility, and I myself am kind of like, well, what would I want to see?
Yeah,
because I'm a fan too.
From fan perspective, if I were coming in, what you know, what would I be excited about?
Well, that's her mom. Her mom's a retired school teacher, and she read the Harry Potter books to her classes. And
before there was attraction.
Before there was attraction, but she hasn't gone yet. When they come here, and we're hopefully going to take them this next time they come, but they've never gone in the Harry Potter.
But I want her to go.
And I want her to see, because it's just like I told her, I said, you walk down Diagon Alley, you walk through the wall, you hear the bricks moving.
You're there.
You're in the movie. And I told her, I said, you will be blown away by, because her dad loves pirates. He loves the detail of the queue. And
he was impressed by the queue line.
He was
like, you
impressed by
feel
the
like
queue.
you're in a movie.
And I told her mom she'll feel the same way walking down Diagon Alley or walking through Hogwarts. You're going to feel that same, that you're in the movie. You're going to see stuff that you saw in the movie, and you're going to, oh yeah, this was in this scene, this was from this
And
film.
for super fans of things like that, it's like it's a rush to be there, and you know.
I started at Universal the week Diagon opened, so I had nothing to do with it, so I can brag about it all I want. But it's like to stand out there and see people literally start crying when they emerge onto the street. You know, it's like that's what it's all about. If you can create that kind of emotion, it's unbelievable. And you know, that's why you have to take it seriously. And the other point too is sometimes, you know, you run the risk of even people that you work with are like, oh yeah, well, you're a nerd, you're a fan, no one's going to care about that. And though I look at it the exact opposite way. I've done it at Universal, and I did it on Star Wars at Disney. It's like, if I'm designing at this level to pass the superfan test, I automatically get everybody else. Because if you've never heard of it before, seen it before, or you're a casual fan, you're not going to care either way. So let me make the choices that are going to work at this level, and you automatically get everyone below.
Well, yeah, because those ones at the top are going to be the ones that are going to tell everybody else, this one was phenomenal, and this is what I saw, and this one, and this part, and this part, and they're going to... He knew exactly what the movies did. I mean,
and word of mouth is really where it's at. You know, well, now they have social media, but you know, people go home and tell their you felt like you were in the movies, or you know, like, or somebody like he's mentioned my dad. I had to convert my dad into being a modern Disney fan, because when we used to go when I was a kid, my dad doesn't like crowds, he doesn't like the heat, he doesn't like standing in line for 2 hours for a ride. And I'm like, no, we got Fast Pass now, no, you know. So I had to change the way he looked at things, and I'm like, no, I'm gonna get you in the park. Yeah. So, but when I got him in the park, like within an hour, he had his cell phone out and he's like videotaping stuff, and he was like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
absolutely.
so you don't think your daughter's crazy, maybe a little crazy, but he was like the detail that Disney or any, like, you know, or even with Universal, the detail that they put into these attractions, and even the queue lines, or, you know, places that they can go visit, it's you really appreciate all
absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
And it's impressive. I mean, it's really impressive. Even to people like my dad who were like, you know, he likes it now.
Well, the same thing happened with my parents. They had no familiarity with Harry Potter, the books or the movies, and they were absolutely blown away by both Hogsmeade and Diagon Alley, because no matter what your level of familiarity, you're immersed in that world, and it's spectacular, you know, and that kind of operates on that level of super fans are happy, and my parents who hadn't any familiarity with it at all are just as impressed because of the immersive quality of the experience.
It really is. So, did you have another one? Or
I do, but I don't think you can answer it. I mean, I can ask the question, but I don't think you have the answer for it.
Oh,
you could probably
challenge accepted.
You can give your opinion.
Okay.
I have one that he might not know either, but go ahead.
Well, no, one of the things in this, my question will come in a minute, but last time we were at Universal, we now have the passes where after 4 o'clock we have the express line. And we went through the Amazing Spider-Man, and we went through the other queue, and I noticed the amount of detail that goes in that ride, just with the Marvel stuff, blew me away, and I was trying to show her as we're walking through. But somebody wants to know, do you ever think Disney will get the full rights to Marvel to do something in the parks?
I have no idea.
No, that's what I said.
I
have no idea.
Yeah,
I mean, they asked. I would love it if they ever did, but I know
a lot of us are hoping that we can see the things like we see in California Adventure with the whole Avengers area. You know, to be able to get some of that over at Disney World because of, you know, it's part of the whole.
Or you could come to the Universal Orlando Resort.
Yes, you can.
And enjoy some fine Marvel experiences.
That's why I go there so often.
But you know, that's the interesting point there is The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man is also a modern classic and moved the needle probably more than anything in the last 20 years, because Islands is 20 years old this year.
Yeah,
and it's still, I still go on Spider-Man and like,
we went
and I work there. And I'm just like, I love that. It's mind-boggling. It's just an unbelievable.
We go every time we go to the park. We do that ride. Yeah. Every time.
And I sit there and I'm thinking of the making and like the timing on this ride. It's off by a
second. Timing has to be spot on.
And the same way with the Harry Potter rides, if they're off by a second, it throws everything. And it's just amazing that they can keep everything that uniform. It's just.
And most of the people that worked on Spider-Man are still there in executive roles, and these guys are just geniuses at what they do, and that ride is a masterpiece.
So I have this is my question. Sorry.
Sorry,
No, because you were talking about the way some of these rides are like an immersive experience, and I was lucky enough to be invited to the Breakfast with Bob Chapek and they were talking about the rides and stuff that's coming, whether it's Galaxy's Edge. The Guardians coaster is what I was going to ask you about. A lot of people, when I reported the news back, what he had said, they were talking about he called it a story coaster. That the person is going to be in the roller coaster cart, but turn towards part of the story.
Right.
So, and everybody, the one question that I got a lot of feedback on was people were saying, is it like the Gringotts over at Universal, because you're on a coaster track, but you're in a story.
Right.
So I'm wondering, do you think that Disney is going to use that same type of story coaster? Is that what they mean by that? I mean,
I honestly don't know, only because I have no exposure to what they're doing with Guardians, obviously.
Right.
They tend not to brief the Universal folks
they should contact you
on the things that they're working on.
But
I think
a story coaster.
Well, what's interesting about that is, because I've even applied that to some recent things I've done at Universal, where you can apply the appropriate level of story to almost anything. And traditionally, it's hard to do that on a roller coaster because it's a thrill ride, it's high speed, and it's hard to really convey a story. But there are still ways, even if it's just creating a unity of time and place, to tell a story on a coaster, on a round ride, on things that you might not traditionally think of as a story delivery system. So not knowing anything about it, what that says to me is it may be a coaster, it may be a thrill ride, but they're going to attempt to tell a story.
Yeah, that's what, because everybody started to speculate, and it's going to be a while before that ride is done, but I remember the same type of chatter going on when they took the tower over in California and turned it into, Mission Breakout.
Right.
And a lot of people were horrified, like, you cannot turn the beloved Tower of Terror into something Marvel, something, Guardians of the Galaxy, like, they're not, like, they weren't around long enough that people felt like they had that. You don't get that honor of getting a whole ride or whatever. And I was one of those, like, I'm going to go a little bit skeptic when I go. And we went. I loved it. I thought it was a great ride.
I was skeptical because, one, I thought, this feels like kind of a force fit. You're trying to capitalize and all that. I was exhilarated by it. And it has a lot to do with the music selections and the sheer cult of personality of Chris Pratt and the whole cast, really. So I was kind of a convert. What was interesting was, to me, that seemed that like Disney was taking a page out of the Universal playbook, because we at Universal embrace the fact that we try to stay very current with the changing tastes and what's hot in pop culture now. Okay. Just by virtue of who these two companies are, Universal just naturally doesn't deal in nostalgia the same way Disney does. Right. That's not to say it doesn't exist. People still have a great deal of affection for properties like E.T., Back to the Future, Jaws. But Universal embraces change and embraces putting the latest and greatest properties out there. And to me, and this is just me talking, but that felt like what they were doing with Guardians. They were also, I think, making a down payment on a future Marvel land. Because that's a term that we use sometimes. It's like, we're going to do this as a down payment, and then eventually the land will fill in.
Let that
around
build
it.
up the interest in the area.
And
Yeah.
you know, and when you go there, they'll like they still have the old fast pass system out there. So like we couldn't get a fast pass till like the last ride of the day. I mean, the queue line is packed. So for people who said that I don't want anything to do with that, they love it because it's like the busiest ride of the day.
Yeah.
Is the Guardians coaster. And when we got back, I tried to explain to people that it's like a bouncing party in there because of the music is up and down, and you know you get a different song. And we had free ride on ours, and we got off of that thing, and I think we laughed for 10 minutes afterwards because it was so much fun.
Yeah, it's just a fun.
The only thing I regret is we didn't get to go through the queue, and everybody tells me you have to go through
the queue. Because again, it's that abundance of detail,
right?
And especially if you're a Marvel fan, it's like it's an Easter egg hunt.
It is. So people were hoping that maybe we're going to see a little bit of that when we get Guardians at Epcot, but I guess we'll find out because who knows. But it is really. I thought of it. Somebody like me who was a skeptic. I mean, just.
She did
go
not
with
want
it.
to like it.
I did not want to like it. I got off. I'm like, this is pretty awesome. And then when we got off in the gift shop, and I was in a particularly good mood, and the kids like, can I get a Guardians jacket? And I'm like buying souvenirs for the kids because I knew that we're going to be going back to Florida and we're not going to be able to get that stuff. I think you just kind of have to keep an open mind when it comes to new attractions and things. Even though I know that a lot of Disney fans don't like change, I've learned that a lot over the past 9 years. But I think sometimes change is good. Because,
absolutely.
Because like with Tower of Terror out there, it turned into something great.
Yeah.
Okay, so did you have anything else?
I think that was I know it's getting a little bit.
I have one more, and then we will wrap up. Christine wanted to know, do you know of, or what your opinion might be, do you think because of technology that they're going to do more overhauls in the Haunted Mansion? Like you got to do Leota's, stone with her face and stuff. Do you think that they're going to... Do you think they'll keep it classic, or do you think that they will continue to add updates?
I personally think that the answer to that question is if there is a way to organically plus something, which is a Walt term, they might employ technology to do that if it betters the experience. And that's something that I try to apply to my work is like, what's the right creative solution to the creative problem that you have? And sometimes the answer is technology, and sometimes it's something a lot more low-tech and simple. But I don't think that any of these parks will stop evolving. I think that if there's an opportunity to make something better, they will. And it may or may not involve technology, but it's like you don't want to do something just because you can.
Right.
It needs to be the appropriate answer to the question that you're asking.
Right. And, Disney's always evolving, so we'll see.
And I did see one other question, and this kind of goes into your Universal role. What are you working on currently at Universal that you can talk about? Or maybe talk about the new Harry Potter ride, or what can you...
What are you allowed to say?
Very little.
Very little.
Watch The Tonight Show, Monday through Friday at 11:35 on NBC. No, so far at Universal, my first project was Race Through New York, starring Jimmy Fallon, and then I spent 2 years as the creative director for the park that we're building in Beijing. That's been announced. And then the last couple of years, I've been working on things that haven't been announced yet.
Nice.
Okay. But snipers are trained on me even as we speak.
I bet.
So we will not even
They followed
touch
him
that.
here.
So before we wrap up, a lot of people are asking, where can they find your books? Where can they find you?
I think this edition of the Haunted Mansion is the only one that's currently in print. Like Pirates is out of print, Screenplay by Disney and the Disney Mountains, they're out of print. But you can find a lot of those on Amazon Marketplace, and you just have to kind of wait for when the price is right. I know The Art of the Avengers sold out, and they do a pretty limited run of those art books to begin with. So those get a little pricey.
I noticed the mountains was a price. I saw that was going for like $95 on Amazon recently.
And I see none of that.
I was going to say, you don't get any of that.
No, I didn't get any of it the first time.
Well, I just want to thank you for coming and talking to our Main Streeters. They are thrilled. They say that it was wonderful and they've loved listening to your stories.
Oh, thank you very much.
And that this has been a really great experience. And if for anybody who didn't catch the full show, we will download it to our YouTube channel. We will pin this lovely show to the top of our Facebook page so that you can go back and rewatch it because it's a good one.
It is.
It's a good one. And
I was more of a
appreciate
fan
that.
than this show than I was.
Seems enough. But,
Yeah.
whatever you want to do. I'm not judging.
So everybody is thrilled, and they are all thanking you so much for coming.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
This was great, Jason. Thank you so
very
much. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. And I was going to tell you about a mini meetup that we're having. I almost forgot with all the excitement. March 2nd at Hollywood Studios is going to be our first mini meetup of the year, and I will put out more information on that probably tomorrow, so watch for that. But again, Jason Surrell, you are awesome, and we really appreciate it. And thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.
You want me to give our lowdown of our social media handles?
No. If you want to, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you can follow us at The Main Street Mouse on Facebook and Instagram. The Main ST Mouse on YouTube. Please remember to subscribe and get notifications. On Twitter, it's The Main ST Mouse. And then you can also follow Michelle Cindershella4 on Instagram, or myself, TMSM_Avenger. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much.
Sounds like a speech impediment.
I know.
This show has more endings than the Fellowship
and
of the Ring.
she's a Rapunzel fan.
It's over.
And I'm a Rapunzel.
Oh, one more thing. I'm not done yet.
So thank you guys for everything, and we will see you next Monday.
Yes, thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.